Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Chris Klein, and I'm with CTC & Associates. My colleague Kirsten Sieber and I will be taking you through today's webinar. Our colleague Pat Casey is helping us out on the technical side of things today. We'd like to welcome you to the third webinar on MnDOT's four-part orientation for principal investigators. Our goal in this series is to give you the information you need as you complete each phase of the research projects you carry out for MnDOT and the local road research board. The orientation consists of 4 one-hour webinars that cover the project lifecycle, beginning with the research idea and continuing through the research cycle until project closeout. Today's webinar addresses activities at the end of your research project, when you're preparing draft and final reports and closing out your contract. As I mentioned, this is the third session in the series. On March 30th, we began the series with developing the work plan and the contract. We started the orientations with that session sort of in the middle of the research cycle to help those of you who were preparing your work plans at that time. The last session in the 4-part series is scheduled for this Thursday. During that session, we'll cover the very beginning of the research cycle and walk you through taking an idea through to the project proposal. Today we'll be covering 3 major topics: preparing draft and final reports, publicizing research results, and closing out your project. As we work through today's session, please make note of your questions. We'll get in touch with you after today's session with a copy of the PowerPoint we're using today and instructions for how you can send your questions to us by email. We'll gather all those questions, prepare responses, and we'll get back to the group with a comprehensive question and answer document. Kirsten will close out today's session with more information about what's next in the series, and that happens to be the final webinar, and how we'll follow up with you after today's session. The focus of our first topic today are the final reports that are often prepared to wrap up a research project. Not every project concludes with a final report, but many of them do. Your work plan and work order contract will specify the type of final product you'll produce as your project concludes. If that happens to be a final report, we'll walk you through today some of the most important things you'll need to know before you begin to prepare that final deliverable. And if you will prepare a final report, keep in mind that there are separate tasks for both the draft and the final reports. And you'll need to submit that draft report by the due date that's listed in your contract. Keep in mind that it can take up to 4 months to prepare your draft report for final publication, and when it is published, it's published electronically. Reports are posted on the MnDOT RS&L website, and they're also submitted for cataloging in transportation libraries and databases. As I said, not every project concludes with a final report. Your final deliverable could be something else. It could be a user manual, a training video like the one we have listed on the slide, could be a spreadsheet tool, or some other type of product. And if it does happen to be a user manual, keep in mind that we have templates for your use. Check with your project coordinator, and marketing and communication staff can help you with that as well. If your work plan and work order contract does specify something other than a final report as your final project deliverable, we encourage you to discuss with your project coordinator how best to publish that document or other deliverable, and think about whether an online version would be useful. We can discuss options with you. Well, let's go back now to a discussion of what you'll need to know to prepare your final report. If you know your project will conclude with that final report, we encourage you to start early. Today we'll highlight the key things you'll need to know, but you'll want to spend some time on your own with the guidance documents that we'll talk about today. And those documents are available on the Research Services website at the link appearing on the slide. And there you'll find the research report guidelines, a report template in Word, and a blank technical report documentation page. Additional guidance is also available from your contacts at MnDOT Research Services and Library, and also the University of Minnesota's Center for Transportation Studies, and we'll explain more about that contact in just a minute. So as you're preparing your draft report, you'll want to review those publishing guidelines I just mentioned before beginning to prepare that draft. Pay special attention to Chapter 2, and that's where really all of the details can be found with regard to formatting your final report. You'll want to use the report template that's available in Word format. And keep in mind that if you submit a draft final report that uses something other than Word and you have not followed the guidelines, it's very possible that that document will be returned to you. Something that I'm sure you're very familiar with, make sure to obtain permission to use copyrighted materials if that's necessary. And as I said, submit that final report in Word, but you can also submit a PDF along with that Word document if you choose. Here's a list of report components. They're typical of any research report, and you're probably already familiar with most of them. Something I think you'll find quite helpful are the appendices that are included in MnDOT's publishing guidelines. The appendices include examples of these report components, so I encourage you to have a look after today's session. And there you'll find examples of the title page, an acknowledgments section. Now that's optional. If you want to include it, you can see some examples, a table of contents, and that's needed for reports of more than 10 pages. A list of tables and figures, you can find an example in those appendices, and a list of abbreviations. Let's talk a minute about the executive summary. We encourage you to limit that executive summary to no more than 3 pages, and in that you'll include a synopsis of the research, you'll address main findings, conclusions, and also describe the significance of your research. You'll close out with recommendations, next steps, and potential benefits. The work plans, which we've discussed in a previous webinar, now include a research benefits and implementation task, and you're going to be preparing a deliverable to meet the requirements of that task, and we would encourage you to refer to that deliverable as you're preparing your draft report. And finally, we encourage you to write for a general audience. Limit the technical details as much as you can. As with other issues we've covered during this orientation series, each research project is unique, and the nature of your research will determine to some degree the content of your final report. But there is a standard general structure to MnDOT's research reports. And it starts off with the introduction, and that serves as the report's first chapter. Now this varies depending on the objectives in your work plan, and basically it describes the general organization of your report. The body of the report follows the outline of your work plan, and you'll be getting feedback from your TAP meetings in terms of what was included in your interim deliverables. Essentially, you'll be getting feedback throughout the course of your research project to help you prepare this draft report. Keep in mind that the final chapter should contain, as I said, recommendations or conclusions, next steps, and potential benefits. In addition to the executive summary and the body of the report, you'll probably have other report elements to include. We'll cover them briefly here, but remember, you can find lots of detail in the printed publishing guidelines. First of all, references. We ask that you cite your references using a common style, such as Chicago Manual of Style or APA. You can cite your references through the use of footnotes or a reference number in parentheses or brackets, and you will be creating a reference section for your report. Appendices, where possible, we suggest that you reference the appendix in the body of the report. And again, I'll refer you back to the guidelines for your use of title pages and page numbering. Graphics are included in most reports, if not all, and we recommend that you embed them in the document. We ask that you don't use object links or other files, and only use screenshots if the resolution is good. We ask that you avoid placing graphics in a landscape orientation that can make it challenging for printing. Include captions, and you'll also include alternative text descriptions. And this is something we'll talk about in detail in just a minute. These are used for the visually blind or visually impaired. We've talked about how you'll prepare your draft report. You'll use MnDOT's Word template, and you'll follow the publishing guidelines. But let's talk now about what happens after you've completed your initial draft. MnDOT has a contract with University of Minnesota's Center for Transportation Studies. We'll refer to them as CTS as we continue through the webinar today. And CTS has a contract to review and prepare all research reports for publication, and that includes reports that are prepared by any researcher, whether that's a researcher from the University of Minnesota, from another university, or from a private consulting firm. Beth Andrews at CTS coordinates the technical and editorial reviews of your draft final report. Here's Beth's email. You'll send your draft final report to Beth by email, copying your technical liaison and project coordinator. I've mentioned this due date listed for the draft final report task that appears in your contract, and you'll want to have gone through the exercise of the preparation so that you can meet that deadline. You can meet that due date listed for the draft final report task in your contract. Now, a lot will happen before then. We know that you're going to be working closely with your technical liaison, your project coordinator, and the TAP, and you may end up going through multiple versions of your draft final report before you feel it's ready to submit to CTS. When you do submit it to CTS, Beth Andrews will provide direction and due dates for every step in the process. She will walk you through everything that needs to happen. And now that process starts with the technical review. But before I get to the technical review, let's just step back a minute to something that I want to stress as being really important as you're going through and preparing your draft report. As principal investigator, we ask that you perform a thorough spelling and grammar check of your draft before it goes through that technical and editorial review. You'll be looking for technical elements, of course, but we ask that you also do that spelling and grammar check as well. Do it while you're drafting, do it as you do a final read-through. You'll want to do this independent check of grammar and spelling because the CTS editor, who will eventually do that editorial review of your report, isn't going to be checking spelling and grammar throughout the entire report. The CTS editor will check spelling and grammar in only these elements of your draft final report: in the abstract, which is on the technical report documentation page, and we'll talk about that specifically in a minute, the executive summary, the first chapter, sometimes referred to as the introduction, and the conclusions chapter. Okay, now let's go back to the technical review workflow. Beth Andrews, as I said, is the coordinator for this process. You've reviewed your draft final report. You've gotten your feedback from your TAP. Beth will provide that direction for you. The technical liaison gathers all of the TAP comments and sends them back to you as the principal investigator. You'll submit a revised report to the technical liaison that addresses all of the TAP's comments. And again, this is the technical review. After your technical liaison reviews that revised draft, after you have made whatever changes you felt needed to be made, you will send that revised draft final report to CTS to begin the editorial review process. Now, the editorial review will cover these main points. Remember, you've gone through your technical review, you've already done your independent spelling and grammar check. What the CTS editor will do is assure conformity with the research report guidelines, and this is primarily for formatting and consistency. He or she will be looking for consistency in headings and how you formatted your references. Is the page numbering appropriate? Have you followed the naming and numbering convention for figures, tables, and graphs that the template provides for? Have you included a table of contents if one is needed? Have you formatted it appropriately? And how are your graphics displayed? And again, that editor will look for spelling and grammar in those 4 elements of your report: the abstract, the executive summary, the first chapter, and the conclusions chapter. When the editorial review is complete, Beth will get back in touch with you, and she'll send you a memo with the recommended editorial changes. And that memo will come to you as the principal investigator, and your project coordinator will also receive a copy of this. And your project coordinator stays plugged in to this process throughout. So if you have questions, if you need assistance, by all means, Beth is a wonderful contact for you, and your project coordinator will be available to assist as well. So Beth sends this memo with the recommended editorial changes, and along with that, she'll send the marked up pages containing the editorial comments, so you can see specifically what the editor is questioning or requires additional information about. You'll also get templates for the title page and the technical report documentation page, and you'll get information about what are termed Section 508 requirements. And these are requirements so that you're adapting the document for visually impaired readers, and we're going to talk about that in some detail in just a minute. One thing that I want to encourage you to do, look at the editorial comments in the executive summary and use them as a prompt to check the remainder of your report. Now, quite often the executive summary will either be taken directly, excerpts directly from the body of the report, but certainly it will be reflective of what's appearing elsewhere in your report. So use those editorial comments in the executive summary and translate them to the body of the report as it would be appropriate. You'll incorporate those changes and any other requested changes into your draft report, and then you'll resubmit it as a final report to CTS. I've mentioned this technical report documentation page a few times. Now let's talk about it in a little more detail. You'll get this template when Beth sends you information about the editorial review. Some people refer to it as a tech doc page, and CTS can fill out some of this, but we ask that you complete specific elements of it that you are really in the best position to complete, and that would include the title and subtitle, authors, and these numbers here correspond to the template form. That's why I've got numbers. I realize the template is a little difficult to see in this format, but when you have it in front of you, you'll see that the field 4 is title and subtitle, 7 is authors, 9 is the performing organization and address, and these last two, abstract and keywords, are really essential for you to be completing. So let's talk a little bit more about those. The abstract should be 250 words or fewer, and I think we're all familiar with abstracts. They should be a summary of the report's most significant information. And you'll also need to complete field 17, which is labeled document analysis and descriptors. And this is where you'll enter keywords. And these keywords that are, essential descriptors of your research will be used for locating the report on the web or in a database search. And we ask that you do complete those for us here as well. And again, I'll refer you to the publishing guidelines. Appendix A has an example. We talked about Section 8 just a few minutes ago, and I wanted to go into it a little more detail here. Along with the editorial comments that you'll get during this editorial review process and the tech doc page that we just looked at, you'll also be asked to prepare alternative text descriptions that meet the requirements of federal law. And this slide provides a little bit of background on this requirement. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 requires federal agencies and their contractors that develop or provide, maintain, or use information technology to make sure that that information is accessible to people with disabilities. Research receiving federal funding must comply with that law. And how you will comply with that law is by creating these alternative text descriptions that are used to make sure your report is accessible to people with visual impairments. So when you're writing these descriptions, you'll be writing them of figures and images, and these descriptions then can be read aloud by Adobe. Figures and images include graphs, photographs, and equations. You'll want to describe these figures and images in broad terms. There are a couple instances where what you might think is a figure and image that would require this type of description doesn't. And one of these cases is a table that you've created in Word or Excel. That would not require an alternative text description. But this caveat, if you place a table in the document as a picture, which means you've copied and pasted it as a screenshot, then alternative text is required. So how do you add these alternative text descriptions to your final report? The publishing guidelines include screenshots and step-by-step instructions for adding these descriptions, but I thought we'd go through a very quick example today to show you how easy it is to do it. So here's an example if you're using earlier versions of Word, documents that are not the .docx file name. So it's as easy as this. You right-click on the figure or image and select Format Picture. Then you select the Alt Text tab. You can see that Word is really set up for you to add these descriptions quite easily. So after you select the Alt Text tab, you'll see a text box appear and you type your alternative text there. Click OK and you're done. I'll refer you to Appendix G of the Research Report Guidelines for other examples. You'll see screenshots, step-by-step instructions, easy to do. But if you do find you need some help, contact Beth, ask for some assistance. Beth is very happy to help. What CTS will do after you've completed these alternative text descriptions and included them in your report, they'll convert your Word document to a PDF and ensuring that that alternative text is present in the final PDF. So after you've addressed all the editorial comments, you've prepared your tech doc page, you've prepared your alternative text descriptions, you're nearing the end. You'll then send your separate, clearly labeled files to CTS. And again, you're going to be sending this in the Word template, but you'll have modified the Word template that now contains your complete research report. You'll add the title page and you'll add the executive summary. You'll also provide your completed technical report documentation page, but there's no need to prepare a cover page. CTS will do that for you. And there's one other thing I wanted to mention. If there are documents that you want to include in that final report that are not electronically available, we ask that you scan them and then provide them to CTS along with your final files. And what CTS will do is scan them into the PDF of your final report. There are a few things that you would provide to MnDOT Research Services as you're wrapping up your final report. You've sent your final report information to CTS, but you'll also want to provide email addresses of individuals to receive notice of the final report's publication if you don't plan to distribute the publication yourself. And again, that information you'll want to provide through your project coordinator, and your project coordinator will make sure that that information gets to the marketing and communications folks at MnDOT. You'll also want to send separate files of any graphics that could be used in other communications, and preferably these would be JPEG or GIF files. And I'll just step back a minute to talk about how you would be gathering these graphics throughout the research project. I realize you're at the end of your research here, but we encourage you, as you're just thinking about your research, you're just launching your research project, we know that you and your research team will be taking, at least likely for many projects, will be taking photos and perhaps video during the project. We also want to encourage you to work with our marketing and communications staff, and they can help you capture important images throughout the life of your research project. So our assumption is that you have kind of a library of images, graphics, supporting materials that we would like to be able to have access to as well at this point in the research project. For one very important reason, we'll need photos to include with the technical summary that Kirsten will be talking about in a little bit, and other web-based products that we will use to promote the results of your research. And while original files are best, they have the highest resolution. We know that sometimes, people will hope that photos embedded in a research report will be adequate, and in many cases, those are low-resolution images, and they won't provide the quality that we need for these other publications. And we want to make sure that your research is presented in the best possible way. So again, whatever graphics you have, we encourage you to share them with us. After you've sent in your final files, CTS will do a final review of your report, and they may ask you for some final minor corrections. When all of those have been resolved, that final PDF of the entire report is submitted to MnDOT Research Services and Library for posting. And MnDOT will post that report. As I said, all of these reports are published electronically and not in print. They'll post it on the MnDOT RSNL website. They'll also submit the report to a variety of outlets, and these include TRID, the National Database of Transportation Research, TRB e-News, and additional transportation agencies and libraries where your research will be highlighted. MnDOT will also send emails announcing the newly published research report to transportation practitioners. And MnDOT will continue to highlight research results and the availability of research in publications and communications. And Kirsten's going to be talking about that very topic next. So now I'd like to turn it over to Kirsten, and she'll take us through the rest of today's session.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. So yeah, let's talk about now publicizing your research results. So the marketing and communications staff is available to you, the PI, throughout the research process, and they offer a wide range of products to assist you in publicizing your research results, both during the project and after it is finished. It's really important for you to think about how you will publicize your project at the beginning of the project. As Chris mentioned, it's helpful to get pictures or videos along the way so that you have them for the final report or other means of publicizing your research. And the marketing and communications folks can help you with photos, videos, and connect you with other available resources. So let's review some of the publications that are available on the Research Services and Library website. You can find research reports by visiting this website, clicking on the Project tab, and doing a search there. And you can also browse by year, research category, researcher, or even technical liaison. You will also find supplemental information there, including videos, articles, and related materials. Each year, Research and Library Services produces an at-a-glance report, which provides a quick overview of the MnDOT research program. In it, you will find an overview of the research process, tables of in-progress and completed research projects that include basic project information and statistics about the research program. A technical summary is a two-page report that showcases the purpose, background, and findings of selected research projects. This report is produced as your final report is being completed. The technical summary is posted on the Research Services and Library website along with the final research report. It specifically highlights the needs and goals of the research, how the research was conducted, what was learned from the research, and any next steps. And the summary also includes images and quotes from key participants. A MnDOT consultant will interview the PI by phone, and they also interview the technical liaison and the project coordinator to complete the technical summary. So here's a list of web-based products where your research may be highlighted. New projects are announced in MnDOT's employee newsletter, which is called Newsline. Other Minnesota-focused publications that may include articles on your project include The Accelerator, which is the newsletter produced by Research Services, Crossroads, which is a blog focused on Minnesota transportation research, or the Minnesota Local Road Research Board newsletter. And an article may also be submitted to TRB's Transportation Research e-newsletter, which comes out every Tuesday. There are a variety of other communication products that could feature your research project. Some of these include articles in national publications, webinars, manuals or user guides, social media postings, videos, which may be on the Research Services and Library website or MnDOT's YouTube channel, or at local and national conferences. The marketing and communications staff, along with a local road research board outreach consultant, attend conferences and meetings to showcase local and state transportation research. They make a presentation and/or staff a booth with information about research projects. Researchers or technical liaisons may also present at some of these venues. As you can see, there are a number of meetings, conferences, and webinars where your research can be highlighted throughout the year. Some of these include the annual Transportation Research Board meeting that takes place in Washington, D.C. every January. Minnesota-based conferences include the Minnesota City and County Engineers Annual Conferences, which also happen in January. The Minnesota Transportation Conference is in March. MnDOT has district employee days in both April and October, and the University of Minnesota Center for Transportation Studies holds its research conference in November. And the MnDOT Materials Lab also has a monthly Research Pays Off webinar. So let's talk about closing out your research project. Your technical advisory panel may discuss near the end of the project the benefits of the project, how the research results can be implemented, and how to get the results out to a targeted audience. Other questions the TAP may consider include, is more research warranted? Is another phase of the project needed? Are there opportunities for a presentation of the research results either via webinar or one of the meetings or conferences that we just mentioned? And the marketing communications staff can help you answer those questions and the opportunities to present your research findings. So now you, as the principal investigator at the end of the project, your final report is with CTS and you're ready to close out the project. Everything is done, right? Well, not quite. There are a few more activities that need to happen in order for the project to be truly closed out. These include the creation of the technical summary for most projects, the completion of the performance evaluation, and then MnDOT paying the final project invoice. So let's talk about the new performance evaluation process specifically. This is a new online process that is required for all contracts that exceed $25,000. This process is a two-way evaluation of the project. The technical liaison evaluates you, the principal investigator, and you have the opportunity to evaluate MnDOT. This evaluation is required before the final invoice will be paid. Once the technical liaison's evaluation has been processed, the contract is set to 100% complete and the final payment can be made. And each party is able to contest the other party's evaluation and request a meeting to resolve any differences in scoring. This new online evaluation system replaces the previous one, and you will receive an email from MnDOT's Consultant Services that will tell you how to log in and will provide a link to detailed instructions regarding the evaluation process. You, as the PI, have 3 business days to complete the evaluation. If you do not complete it within that time frame, the system automatically notes that you opted not to complete the evaluation. The evaluation that the PI completes is of their experience working with MnDOT. 5 is the highest score that you can give and 1 is the lowest. You can also enter not applicable if a category doesn't apply to your situation. As you can see, there are 6 categories that you are using to evaluate MnDOT: project knowledge, communication, issue resolution, leadership, flexibility, and project administration. So this is what the evaluation screen looks like. The description box contains questions that prompt you regarding what to consider when scoring each category. In the criteria column, there's a view button that you can click on to see descriptions for each category scoring detail. So that means if you want to say you're thinking something's a level 3, you can see what a level 3 stands for and what kind of the criteria that you're using. You are encouraged to write a comment for each category, which will provide further feedback to MnDOT on the reasoning behind your score. You are required to enter a comment if you are scoring a category at a level 2 or below. And then after you score each category, you will have the opportunity to add general comments, including comments that don't specifically relate to one of the scoring categories. Once you hit the submit button, you are finished with your evaluation and it is saved. You as the PI will have the opportunity to review the evaluation that the technical liaison completed about you. MnDOT Consultant Services will send you an email with the information that you will need to access that evaluation. You have 3 business days to either accept or contest the evaluation. If you don't respond after those 3 days, the evaluation will automatically note that you accepted it. So the technical liaison uses the same scoring scale that you did, the 1 through 5. And the categories that the technical liaison uses to score you, the PI, are project management, project development, deliverables, and consultant, project manager, and key personnel. And this would be you and others from your organization that the technical liaison worked with on the project. So in order to review the category scores and comments, click on Review and Respond to Evaluation. After you review each category, you will see a summary screen that shows the scores for each of the 4 categories and the corresponding weighted scores. You have the opportunity to enter comments or provide a response on this screen. Once you have finished your review of MnDOT's evaluation, click Accept or Contest. After an evaluation is reviewed, they are posted to a MnDOT web database. The exceptions to this are if the ratings are below a 10 or the evaluation is contested. If you contest the technical liaison's evaluation of you, you will request a meeting with the technical liaison. And if you cannot resolve the scoring differences at that meeting, the issue is escalated to supervisors. Once the scoring issues are resolved, the final evaluation is posted to the MnDOT database. If a principal investigator receives a rating of 10 or below, he or she will submit a performance improvement plan to the project's technical liaison. The plan and its contents are at the discretion of the TL. If the technical liaison receives a rating of 2.5 or below, he or she must submit a performance improvement plan to their supervisor. All parties will receive the final evaluation. This includes the principal investigator, the technical liaison, and the PI's research program contact. So let's review the key contacts that we have discussed throughout this presentation. Once the contract is fully executed and the project has begun, the project coordinator is your primary contact at MnDOT. The folks in finance and contract services have answers to your questions about invoicing and amendment, but make sure that you start with your project coordinator before contacting them. Often the project coordinator will know the answer to your questions, or they will facilitate your contact with finance and contract services. The marketing and communications staff can help you with publicizing your research results, as we've already talked about throughout the presentation. And for a full list of contacts in research services and library, please use the link on this slide. So here are some specific research contacts for research services and library. Linda Taylor is the director of research services and library, and Hafiz Munir is the manager of the research services unit. Bruce Holthusen, Faraday Amiri, and Mitch Bartelt serve both as project advisors and project coordinators on research projects, and they also have individual focus areas within research services. In finance and contract services, Debbie Sinclair is the supervisor of the unit and works with funding numbers and budget reports, and she also reviews all of the amendment request forms. Becky Lean administers the master contracts with each of your universities, and she also reviews amendment requests and work plans, processes invoices, and answers questions about performance evaluation. In marketing communications, Shannon Feeke is the supervisor of the unit and oversees the production of the technical summaries and other marketing products, while Sandy McCulley is the publishing coordinator for your draft final reports and works with the Center for Transportation Studies on any publishing issues. And here is a list of the research program contacts at your universities, which hopefully you are already familiar with the person that you would contact at your university. So the final webinar in this PI orientation series is this Thursday at 2 p.m. Central. We jump to the beginning of the research process to discuss getting a research idea funded, We provide an overview of the MnDOT library, and we will address developing and presenting a proposal. If you have questions that were not addressed today, you can send them to the email address that we will send you in the follow-up email for today's session. That email will also include this PowerPoint so that you will have it as a reference. We will post a recording of this webinar online, and we will send everyone a link to the recording when it's available. And we'll also be developing a frequently asked questions and answers that includes all of the questions sent to us for each webinar. We will post the FAQs and the answers on the Research Services and Library website, and then we'll also send them to everyone by email. So on behalf of my colleagues, Chris Klein and Pat Casey, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you found the webinar full of helpful information, and we look forward to you being with us for the final webinar on Thursday. Have a great day, everyone.